Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Pick 6 presented by Sleep Number. I'm your host, Mike Wobschall, inside the field house at TCO Performance Center with a sheet of your questions. Let's get to work. Question number 1 comes from Brian. What are 1 or 2 things we need to improve on in 2018 to bring us a world championship? Tough to do, Brian. This team was 13-3. So to find some room for improvement, we have to nitpick, but let's do it. On offense, we'll go with red zone scoring efficiency. The Vikings were pretty solid in this area, but there's room for improvement there. They certainly have the weapons to score in the red zone with Diggs and Thielen. Their route running, creating space, and Kyle Rudolph is a lethal weapon down there as well. Here's the good news. The Vikings look good running the football this spring, and if you can run the ball in the red zone, you're going to score touchdowns. Also, John DeFilippo, the new offensive coordinator, was part of an Eagles offense last year that went from 49% red zone touchdowns to 64% red zone touchdowns. So the ingredients are there for the Vikings to be a lethal red zone team, and I think they can do it on offense. On defense, how about creating more turnovers? The Vikings were good in virtually every area of defense last year. They were historically good on third down defense, but surprisingly, they were 23rd in the NFL with 19 takeaways and only 5 fumble recoveries. So if we're going to nitpick the defense, we could start with turnovers. Question number 2 comes from Abdi. How explosive will the Minnesota Vikings offense be? Well, I have a suspicion it's going to be pretty explosive. They were pretty explosive last season, and they scored 24 points per game, which was good for 10th, but we've added Kirk Cousins. He was a quarterback of the Redskins last year, and they were 5th in the NFL with 59 passes of 20-plus yards. There's an area where the Vikings can improve. Passes of 20 or more yards. Kirk Cousins knows how to do that, and he's got good weapons here. So I think this Vikings offense has an arrow that's pointing up. Question number 3 comes from Jeff in Sacramento. What are some key elements you see in rookies who succeed with our team? Well, if you look at some recent rookie successes, Pat Elflein, Eric Kendricks, Stephon Diggs, and Anthony Barr, just to name a few, the one thing they all have is great ability, and they were met with opportunity. So that's a little bit out of their control, the opportunity part, but the ability part is in their control. Another thing that these rookies have in common, they're all smart players. Anthony Barr, he's got the green dot. He calls the defense. Eric Kendricks is the man in the middle of the Vikings defense, and Pat Elflein, as a rookie, was manning the middle of the Vikings offensive line. So those guys are all smart players as well. If you want to play in this league, you have to be good, and if you want to play for Zimmer, you got to be smart. The next question comes from Cam. How do you feel Minnesota native Brandon Zylstra looked during OTAs? Could he possibly make the 53-man roster? Yes, he could. Brandon Zylstra did look really good here in the spring during OTAs and minicamp. Good route runner. He's got good speed and quickness. He's a big guy. Coach Darrell Hazel, the wide receiver coach, tells me he's a tough guy as well. That wide receiver competition after Diggs and Thielen is going to be thick, and a big reason for that is the surprise of Brandon Zylstra. Can't wait to watch him in training camp. The next question comes from James. We stick with the wide receivers. I saw last week's Pick 6 program. Give Laquon Treadwell some love. He had an outstanding minicamp. You're right, James. I didn't mean to hate on Laquon Treadwell last week, did I? If I did, my apologies. Laquon has had a really good spring. We're used to Laquon looking really good in practice. The next step for that young man is to look good in games. I think Kirk Cousins can help him do that in 2018. The final question comes from Chris in Utah. There are high expectations for a Super Bowl, but do you think fans are hoping for lightning in a bottle, considering we're coming into the season with a new OC and a new QB? Once again, actually quite the opposite. The Vikings signed Kirk Cousins to a big contract in the offseason. He's in the middle of his prime. So after 4 years in a row of a different starting quarterback each year, I think the Vikings are getting away from the lightning in a bottle routine, and they've got a quarterback who can be under center for a long time. That'll do it for this week's edition of the Pick 6, but we're going to be back next week, so please continue to submit your questions at the email address at the bottom of the screen, and maybe we'll see you in next week's Pick 6.